A lot of stories tell us to chase heroism. Whether you're pulling a sword from stone or the protagonist that never gives up, being the hero in someone else's story is such an idealistic position that sometimes you forget that the hero is human. I think that the idea of heroism has become oversaturated in many stories, and that's not a bad thing. A lot of writers nowadays will use overpowered and badass tropes to make their main character that much more entertaining, so much to the point that it makes the viewer themselves fantasize about it. But no one warns you about what happens when it becomes your only reason to exist. What if I told you that there's a much darker side to heroism, the kind that makes everyone hate you? What's up, internet? I'm Nikando, and welcome to a series I like to call ReZero Deep Dives. Today I want to take a look at how trying to be a hero actually makes you a villain. In today's modern day writing, the role of the hero is constantly being subverted. We now know the term hero is just a label. Take a look at a lot of the most popular modern TV shows' main figures. Homelander, Walter White, Eren Yeager, all of which are antagonistic heroes. But that isn't the only trope that overturns heroism. A lot of archetypes like tragic heroes, anti-heroes disguise classic heroism into a label. All of them have one thing in common, that there is a moral gray area that these characters move in. And ReZero is no exception. It's a story that deconstructs the famous isekai hero trope and puts heroism on its head, exploring this idea in a brand new light. One of the best aspects of Subaru Natsuki is that he has a little bit of all of these hero tropes, but I think he's best classified by something I like to call the false hero, which can be a dangerous figure in storytelling not only because they seek destruction, or in this case validation, but because they claim the role of a savior without embodying any of its meaning. And I'll get to that in just a little bit, but what I like about ReZero is the fact that it makes the prospect of being a hero very unrealistic. The expectation to claim that title becomes exponentially higher when we see our main character expect validation in return. In my most recent video, I explored Subaru's pride and rivalry in the episode Self-Proclaimed Knight Subaru Natsuki, but that wasn't the only component leading to Subaru's downfall. So this week, I wanted to take a look at the bigger picture of his character, as well as a specific example of how Subaru's hero complex made his only reason for existence turn away from him. This video is sponsored by myself. As a college student, it's hard to keep up with a full-time job, school, as well as writing and content creation. Eventually, when the time is right, I plan on going all in as a writer when my passion becomes a little bit more profitable. But in the meantime, check out my channel memberships. If you're a writer, have disposable income, or just want to support me, feel free to take a look. Alright, now back to the video. ReZero makes heroism apparent from a very early point in the series. I mean, one of the first characters we meet is a true hero, and I think this was an intentional writing choice. From the very beginning of the series, we're able to distinguish the difference between a false hero and a true one. This chance encounter in episode 2 sets a standard for our main character and shows us everything Subaru idealizes. One of the more fun things that ReZero does is pile on more and more layers to its main character as you get to know him. And as the audience, we know that Subaru isn't the hero he wanted to be. ReZero Season 1 shows us how Subaru Natsuki contextualizes all of his flaws and how he struggles to get over them. Something we come to understand as the story continues is his deep-rooted obsession with Emilia. There is a lot to learn with this dynamic. Once Emilia showed Subaru kindness, she essentially became the epicenter of his hero complex. And like I've said time and time again, ReZero embraces realism, as this seems to be a major problem with a lot of young men today. I think that there are so many lessons we can learn with the way that Subaru is written. Character writing is always at its finest when a character is ever changing and surprising the audience. Why does a character act the way they do? What are their intentions and what will happen to them next? Understanding Subaru can provide clarity and make his questionable actions in Season 1 that much more enjoyable. There are actually a lot of interesting dynamics that make Subaru's heroism stand out, and while I don't think he can be deemed a hero early on in the series, his intentions just might be enough for people to see him in a good light. I think Arc 2 really exemplifies Subaru's ideal form of heroism as well as his obsession. Subaru hides all of his fatigue and injuries behind a smile just to impress Emilia. And not only that, we see him save the entire village without a single casualty. The reason it's so easy for Subaru to be a hero here is because of Rem. Subaru ends up being Rem's true hero because in this instance, he's not overly fixated on her, and yet his heroism is still tangled up in Emilia's validation throughout Arc 2. Writers are constantly trying to keep their audiences engaged with their characters as well as leaving space for what's to come. And I think that's where Arc 2 excels the most. It does a great job at developing Subaru's mask as well as his hero complex. And at this point in the story, we're rooting for Subaru. We want to see him succeed. A really cool moment that truly emphasizes Subaru's heroism is the moment he solves Rem's internal complex. It's a beautiful moment that highlights the hero that Subaru needs to catch up to. Arc 2 succeeds because it gives a solution to an upcoming problem. And what I was hinting at the beginning of the video is that ReZero explores a realistic prospect of being a hero, and our intentions of being a hero can actually villainize us. But before I get into that, I'd like to evaluate Subaru's character for an upcoming point. How ReZero makes heroism realistic is the fact that it ties Subaru's insecurities into it and the amount of depth that it offers up. What we have is a character with a wide variety of different traits that are interconnected to one another, that are eventually projected onto our extraordinary ensemble of side characters and antagonists that all reflect different aspects of Subaru's life. One of my favorite writers, Brandon McNulty, advocates the best characters are the ones that are constantly at war with themselves. ReZero hits the dime on this when it creates one of the best character relationships. Subaru and Amelia's relationship subverts typical romance and creates a catalyst that aligns with what Brandon is trying to communicate. In every situation, we see Subaru try to accompany Amelia despite what she says. In episode 13, we see Amelia ask Subaru to lie low and stay out of her business, but in reality, Subaru can't stand being sidelined. And when Amelia tells Subaru to wait outside the royal capital, he crashes it and immediately demands recognition as her protector. This ends up leading us to one of the best and most underrated moments of season 1, where Subaru has to finally confront his false heroism and savior complex. He's forced to come to terms with the fact that his acts of chivalry was actually for himself. I think when Subaru is finally left speechless by Amelia calling him selfish is the moment that Subaru can contextualize that he was never a hero. Which leads me back to the point I wanted to make before. Subaru's so-called heroism actually made him out to be a malefactor in someone else's story. It only gets worse from this moment on, and Subaru's flaws and insecurities are only amplified. And it's a plot point designed for a moment that only makes sense when you lose your very reason for existence. I think throughout growing up in my late teens, I was obsessed with chasing my perfect self, and sometimes I feel like I still am. But a lot of the people around me had noticed this and called it an unhealthy lifestyle. And in retaliation, I thought the same thing about them, sometimes even letting something slip that might have blown something out of proportion. But I do believe that the very fact that I retaliated showed some kind of unhealthy obsession, even though it went against what I wanted it to stand for. And as I kept adapting this way of living, the more and more anger and resentment built up for some of the people around me. But when I rewatched ReZero as I got older, I questioned my own pride. I couldn't picture my actions to be a better person to end up doing the exact opposite to me. And as it turned out, my intentions had villainized me. I was a villain because I was changing for my own pride and ego. But the reason I bring this up is the fact that it changed the way I looked at the act of chasing the man that you want to be in an entirely new lens. I like ReZero because, in my honest opinion, there aren't any overarching antagonists throughout season 1. To me, it's just Subaru. Even the projected antagonist in Arc 3 is just a hyperbolic version of our main character, but that's for another time. When I was brainstorming for this video, I was even still wondering, was Subaru ever a hero in the first place? And this idea is still getting brought up even throughout Arc 7 until I believe the answer to that question is truly solidified. But that's the thing that really makes heroism so interesting in ReZero, that the title of hero can only be projected and never given. But I genuinely think that what makes the writing of Subaru's hero complex so good is the way that they brought it to a conclusion. The final scene of season 1 ties back to when Subaru had a falling out with Amelia, where it sets up a reveal really well. After all the fighting was over and he received the perfect loop, Subaru apologizes and says that all the things he did for Amelia was actually for himself. His so-called heroism and larger-than-life persona goes away and treats Amelia like an equal and not some kind of prize. And this is how life should be. Some of us might fail and our intentions might hurt other people. But striving to be that better person should always come at a drive for others rather than your own satisfaction. I believe that this is what makes heroes heroes. I think Subaru represents a cornerstone of being a realistic hero in ReZero. Seeing what's under the mask and watching a person who has fallen from grace still get up despite his flaws is so inspiring. He is a symbolic character of our projected insecurities, all the while fixing his most important bond. And I think that the final scene of season 1 allowed Subaru to live up to the name. When he finally decided that he no longer needed to become a hero, that's when he truly became one.